everybody, welcome back to another video with your host, Rising Oblivion. Today guys, I have even more news in regards to Persona 3 Reloaded. So yes, we have some more details, especially in regards to what Persona 3 Reloaded is. 4Gamer Magazine had an interview with regards to the Persona 3 Reloaded development staff with director Yamaguchi, the P Studio general producer Wada, and also the producer Nitsuma. Hopefully I said those correctly. It's very similar to what we had seen within the weekly Famitsu magazine. However, 4Gamer has even more details here. So if you've had some questions about what Persona 3 Reload is or P3R, if you've had some concerns about this, basically, this interview, I think, does some of the best in regards to some of the harder questions that we've had in regards to what Persona 3 Reload is. So let's go ahead and just jump into this. First things first, let's talk about the inception of it, right? When was this game being created? And some of the first things Wada says here is, thank you for the time today, firstly. Tell us about Persona 3 Reload, and Wada talks a little bit about that. He says, firstly, we know that many people wanted a remake, which... and he says here, was including the survey that Atlas conducts each year. So yes, those surveys actually swayed the opinions of the P Studio staff in regards to what they should make. And it actually worked. So they said that somewhere around the time of the development of Persona 5 Royal, the later half of 2019, is when they started actually developing Persona 3 Reload. So they asked, was that after the release of Persona 5 Royal on PS4? And he said yes. So basically they started corralling people after Royal was just finished. And he said that it translated around half of the studio to be there. And P Studios then started working on the new game engine, which is what they used for stuff like Royal and whatnot. So that is what ended up happening. They switched a lot of the people who were working on P5R's development team. After P5R was finally completed, they transitioned the development into P3R, having P Studios work on the brand new engine to have their first project to be on the scale that was going to be a worldwide simultaneous release, which is what we are seeing with P3 Reloaded, which is really cool. And it is good to think about that, right? Persona 3 Reload is going to be the first time that this is going to be something that happens. We're going to have a simultaneous multi-console release all around the world. They then were asked, please tell us what kind of work was done on P3R, like what kind of work was it? And Yamaguchi goes in to say that it is a full remake of the original Persona 3, which I believe we all know about, which released in 2006 for the PS2. Elements such as the worldview, story, characters are unchanged from the original version, which is good, we like hearing that. However, the game will be remade taking into account a modern design functionality that has been enjoyed for the standards of the current line of Persona games. And they say, putting it simply, this is a remake that aims to follow the players to experience P3 in a similar way to P5. And I know some of you don't like that, but that's the way they're going for. I'm just the messenger here. Persona 5 is a title that has become the standard for how games play for the current Persona fans. We know from surveys and other sources, but also because P5 is a title which has expanded amongst the popularity of the Persona series worldwide, so both for domestic and overseas fans. So they're talking a little bit about how big Persona 5 was, not just in Japan, but the rest of the world. And they wanted to encapsulate that sort of spirit and that sort of play style in P3R. So that's kind of what they were going for here when it comes to this game. They even go to talk about how they want this to be a game that plays similar to P5. I believe they even changed the wellness of the game. They talk about this in the interview here, that your players could get kind of sick or they could need a day where they have to rest. That is actually gone. So the system that restricts your actions when tired or sick, this is verbatim what they said, was the core part of the game's progression, but randomness to this element sometimes made it difficult to progress as you wanted. And now that they're doing a actual calendar system, that's something that is gone. Those random effects of the wellness is gone. Instead, they're going more towards bringing just the calendar system just to be more of the thing that progresses you through the story day to day, not having to judge whether or not you have to rest a certain day or do this a certain day based on the wellness of your character. It's more done on just the strictly calendar system that the mainline Persona games have kind of gone for. But that's pretty cool. Them taking P5 as a gameplay standard, I don't think is bad. I know a lot of people are going to be a little bit upset about that, but when it comes to the mainline fans, right? A lot of people liked P5, and they of course are going to go for that. I think this game could still be very true to what P3 is, but we'll have to wait and see, right? Until we play it, we can't fully understand that and fully get what that means. Like, is this just going to be a carbon copy of just P5 but just P3 characters? We're gonna have to wait and see. They even go into a little bit of the detail here in regards to social links, which is something I think a lot of people were wondering about when it came to this game. And they actually asked, you know, the new progression system is usually in the modern ways of playing Persona games, you want to beat the dungeon in as few days as possible so you can spend the maximum amount of time on your social links and other activities that, you know, aiming to get all the social links done on the first playthrough. And Yamaguchi actually comes in here to say that maxing all social links in one playthrough is not as hard as it was in the original version of this game. So similar to what P5, it's not easy, but is achievable when it comes to good time management, he says. So it seems like it is going to be possible to do, you know, most of the stuff that you want to do within one playthrough. You're not having to do tons of multiple playthroughs. Again, it's more towards what P5 had. I think more people just in the standard fan base, not the people who are like super critical about the series, I think are going to want that. It is nice not having to do multiple playthroughs, but sometimes it's nice to get to, you know, have a little bit more out of the game by doing another playthrough or two. But I think overall that's a pretty good change. The social links were a little bit more harsh when it came to the past sort of games, so this is nice to see. Moving on here, they even go into some more detail in regards to FES and portable. It says, from the interviewer, they said, it seems that there are none of the additional elements from Persona 3 FES or Persona 3 Portable because it is the standard P3. However, new episodes are being added to be into the main story. They ask, you know, are the new things being added to the story? Yamaguchi goes in to say that scenarios that were in the original, such as the main story, social links, are basically the same. There is no P3 FES post-story content or P3P, female protagonist. However, that does not mean that there aren't any elements from those two titles. So it seems like there's going to be elements from not just FES that people thought, but also elements from Portable that are also going to be in this, assuming social links, areas, different places like that are still going to be included from those two other iterations of Persona 3. So it doesn't seem like they're changing the main story or anything like that overall, which is good. I'm glad that they are doing that, but they're still giving us the bits from Portable and the bits from FES that I think they really want to have within this remake, which is good. I'm glad that they're actually doing that. It's pretty good. I'm glad that they're keeping things to, you know, being as somewhat true as possible, but not taking out things from the other iterations of the game. They then brought up things about the actual text and voice work within this game. They said it seems that the text and voice work must have been significantly increased. Then Yamaguchi goes in to say yes, it has the largest amount of voice work in the series, which is pretty crazy to think about. The Persona series already has a high playtime, but if you listen to all the voices throughout the game, I think you'll be able to enjoy it to the fullest. So they did more voice work, more text work for this game, which if you didn't know, they actually have a brand new cast of characters for P3 Reload. It's not going to be the original characters or anything like the P3 dancing game. It is going to be a brand new cast of characters. It's all over Twitter and stuff. I wanted to go through it maybe, but it just seems like something arbitrary. Most people I think are just going to play the game without noticing the different voice actors, but there are some different voice actors there. And they also go on to talk about Tartarus. If you don't know what Tartarus is, basically it's a dungeon with over 250 floors that randomly generate. If you didn't know, the older Persona games had some generated floors. If you played P3 and P4, you definitely know what I'm talking about. Yamaguchi goes in to talk about how P3 Reload changed that a little bit. It says it was the first thing that came up as a point for improvement when working on the remake. If you don't know, a lot of people really don't like this part about P3, which is understandable from the bits I've played and streamed it. It is very just, you're going up floors, and a lot of it looks the same. But they go on to talk about how it was something they had a lot of discussion about, and they were aware how fans actually felt about this. So this is good. Finally, Atlas is doing something like paying attention to us and seeing the things that gamers aren't really liking about their games. It said Tartarus is closely tied to the world and story, so it wasn't something that could change the structure of the dungeon. So it does seem like there are some generated parts of it, and they're still keeping Tartarus to be that that doomy, dark hour, gloomy bits, but they're trying to make it not as boring as they could have had it. You know, they're trying to make it be a bit more of a funner experience. Yamaguchi says, yes, for example, you couldn't fix the dungeon like to be in P5. P5, every part of the dungeon are completely planned out. It's not randomly generated, but with its various gimmick being reduced by the number of floors, so they couldn't have the amount of floors that Tartarus usually has. Like I said, over 250 floors, they couldn't do it like P5, where every floor was like distinctly something different. So they said, while staying faithful to the original, we created a dungeon that can be enjoyed without getting bored by adding numerous small elements. So they're just not incrementally making each stage just a little bit different. They're trying to actually do things to have a full-on different change. Maybe you go up 10, 20 floors, it has a completely different design that looks a lot better than what we had seen within the past game. It's not going to be these randomly generated stuff that stays boring, right? So they're working on that, which is, I'm glad they're doing that. Persona 4 Golden, I think, kind of has a good in-between point. Each of the different, you know, characters that you're, you know, dealing with within their own dungeons or whatever, they have a completely different kind of element to it. So I think it might be something more towards what we see in P4 Golden or something like that. It seems like maybe that's kind of what they're leaning towards, where not that it's changing per like person or something, but once you go through a certain amount of floors, the design or something like that will change. Maybe there's a new gimmick or something like that. It seems like that's what they're kind of shooting for. They also go on to talk about character models and animations. Those have all changed quite a bit, giving better head and body proportions for one. Which, if you play P5, you kind of get that. A lot of the characters were really skinny, like super skinny, and had like huge heads for some reason. Like the proportions were weird and comical. Yamaguchi even goes to say. So they're changing that to be, you know, better and having the still cool and comical aspects that are important to P3. They said, but making sure it, you know, it looks right. Another element they talk about here that they're curious about, just like Tartarus, is the battle system. Firstly, the player can be given direct commands to the party members, right? They ask the interviewers. They say also, has the AI been able to improve in the day to the age? Yamaguchi then comes in and says the player can give direct commands, which is good. So we have the direct command things. You can command your whole party. If you didn't know P3 originally, you could only control the protagonist, and the other members did kind of whatever they wanted to, but you are able to give direct command, which has been in the standard since P4. There's also the automatic fight, and there's also some different gameplay styles that they've been known for within the Persona series that we're going to be having within this game as well, which is really good. I'm glad they decided to do that. Another question that the interviewer asked is that would we also be seeing new skills during battle, for example, light and darkness elements, having been skills that were added into P5 that deal additional damage or instant death. He says, I cannot talk about specifics yet, but for P3R we are making adjustments to elements, including skills that can be used that the full, you know, cast of party members can all play in active roles equally as possible. So it seems like they're trying to tailor the battles and the like lineup of characters there with different elements in their skills. So we might be seeing some different elements here. It might just be the standard ones plus some other things for the game to make sense. If you didn't know, like Psychic type was also kind of added for P5R. P4 Golden has some different things. Each Persona game kind of varies a little bit when it comes to the elements used in like character skills and stuff, but it looks like they are trying to experiment with that, but maybe they don't fully know what's going on there just yet. So it's good that they're trying to do that. And they said that they are interested in gathering feedback from players who had played the game before for this game, so it is good that they are doing that. And this little bit here is a little bit funny. It said, one more thing I would like to ask before finishing. How did you come up with the name Reload? The interviewer asked. He says, well, or Wada rebuttal says, well, we originally wanted to add the R to the title. There was P5R as a definitive version of P5. We wanted to approach this project with the same enthusiastic mindset. It also invokes the aspect of the remake, but calling it Persona 3 Remake wouldn't feel quite right for the Persona series title, which is kind of true, right? Persona 4 Golden, Persona 5 Royal, Persona 3 FES, Portable, you know? They never just say remake or hyper version or super version. They always kind of add something a little bit different there. So that's kind of why they went with Reload. Obviously, Reloaded, talking about the guns used in the game. You summon your Persona by, you know, maybe I can't say this on YouTube, but you kind of get it. If you played P3, that's kind of where they ended up going for. But that's kind of where the interview ends. We have some details here in terms of the characters, the animations, the name of the game, how long the development's been going on, why it's called what it is, some different things that they're trying to do. From how it sounds, they've really cracked down on the story and Tartarus stuff, which I imagine is something they're going to, you know, had to obviously talk about first, right? The additions, what they wanted with P3, you know, portable, and what they wanted with FVS. It seems like they've done a lot of that stuff. I think they are now at the point where it kind of just seems like they're trying to fine-tune the game's combat. That seems to be kind of where they're at now, how they're going to go about doing that. It seems like the overworld and things are done, the animations for the most part are done. Obviously, how they're going to approach the game, it seems like they have that all laid out. It seems like maybe they're just trying to finish up some of the actual turn-based gameplay type things in the future so they can get that all down. But looks like the game's been doing pretty well. I mean, by that means the game's kind of been in development for about 4 years now, getting close to it. At some point in this year, they would have hit the 4th year of development. So that's what P Studio has been working on quite a bit. This wasn't something that was outsourced to a third party. It was done in P Studio, the same people who had done Persona 5 and some of the other games. So this is done pretty legit, and I like that, because some of the third party spin-off type stuff or remakes or whatever have not been great. And you know, you could say this is them taking time away from something like Persona 6, but what are you gonna do, right? I'm glad people at least can now experience P3 in some way. I'm not too doom and gloom about this. I'm speculative, but until I play it, I'm not going to give any harsh comments or anything yet. I'm still pretty excited about this, though, still. At least from what I've seen, it should be a cool experience either way. But thanks for this video, guys. Like, comment, subscribe for more content. As always, I'll see you in the next video. Thank you all so much for watching. I'm going to be streaming Final Fantasy 16 at midnight during release night, so check that out. It should be like Thursday, I guess technically Friday. By the time you're watching this video, it might be irrelevant. But yeah, thank you so much for watching. Hope you show up. Bye!